So for this last video about the theological foundations of the Helen Keller Spiritual Life Collaborative, I want to speak about community, about being together, about what it takes to get along and to co-create and to be in the world together with one another. I'm guessing for you and for many people on the planet, understanding how to get along in the world with each other is important. Perhaps you don't have high ideals about world peace, but perhaps you want to be able to get along with the people who you share a household with or who live in your community. It's kind of important. And simultaneously, we see throughout our history as a species that hasn't always gone so well. It's hard. And there are many examples of how we human beings have not collaborated and coexisted in ways that were peaceful and nurturing. And yet this is the call of life. And I would suggest it's probably one of the highest desires that we each individually and collectively share. It's one of the highest desires of our spiritual traditions, the beloved community, the kingdom of God, the motivation of church in many ways, building spaces and practices for people to be together in their worship and love of God. A big part of that intention is that they may live in peace and in community, in loving community with one another. We've had those ideals, and sometimes they've been lived out and made manifest, and many times they've created circles of community that have become somewhat uniform, where it's been difficult when people in that community perhaps have doubted or changed or asked questions. Often that process hasn't brought change to the community, but caused that person to be ostracized or set out. The other problematic way that communities sometimes operate is that they perhaps become loving and nurturing amongst themselves, but then at war or at odds with other communities. This dynamic is just everywhere. It's amongst religious communities, amongst professional communities, economic communities. I think one of the best examples I think of is my parents' generation, the hippies from the 60s and 70s, who made radical steps to kind of step out of the norm of their day and say, hey, there is another way. And then they just couldn't help themselves, though, but to all kind of dress the same and act the same and have sort of their own modes of what it meant to be in that community or what it meant to be outside of that community. It's almost like we just haven't been able to help ourselves for a long, long time. There's something about our human makeup that just loves a uniform, and think of what a uniform is, a unity in form. We love to come together with other people who look like us, act like us, and reflect to us kind of what we want to be or who we aspire to be. And again, I believe there can be a lot of goodness in that, and we're starting to see the shadows aspect of that desire, the limitations when we need to have a community that conforms around us. The vision of community for the Helen Keller Spiritual Life Collaborative is different. It's a step beyond this model of life as being formed by a community that mirrors who we want to be and that holds a set of practices or beliefs that is uniform, within which we might feel safe. the vision of community for the Helen Keller Spiritual Life Collaborative is one of diverse forms of community, diverse forms within which a unity lives. It's my perspective that the vision of the new church that Emanuel Swedenborg proclaimed was a vision of this new paradigm coming into being in the world that began back in the 1700s. And this new paradigm is one where we are not primarily identified with the clothes that we wear or the words that we profess or even the practices that we participate in, but that we're primarily defined by our divine essence. Our primary identity is that we are all children of God. We are all connected on this kind of biological, organic, living level. And what unites us, what draws us together, is not necessarily the way we look, but it is that loving essence. And that loving essence does draw us, it does call us to live in certain ways. It calls us to love in certain ways. And it can call us together with others to love in those similar ways. But forming gatherings and communities and relationships that are grounded not in conformity of appearance, but in conformity of, not even conformity, I need a different word. They're gathered not around conformity of appearance, but around a cohesion, a coherence perhaps, around shared values, shared intentions, shared dreams, and shared collaborative, creative efforts in the world. In the Helen Keller Spiritual Life Collaborative, my aim, my vision is that people will gather together who are all very, very different from one another on the outside. Perhaps have very different languages to speak about spirituality, different body types, different styles, different ideas about who they are and what they want to bring into the world, while simultaneously having a shared value structure that prioritizes, as I've already articulated, love, this unity that exists deep within, that recognizes within our diversity that we all come from the same source and have this shared universal love that flows through us, that will come together with this commitment to honesty, this commitment to being exactly who we are, even when that's uncomfortable, even when naming something about who we are might not be preferred or liked by others, we still value it. We value it because we want to know each other deeply. We want to know the fullness of each of us. We want that, even if it's painful, and we're willing to accept the pain of that because we want the realness of that. And then where we come together in useful endeavors through sharing who we really are and what really calls to our hearts. It's my deep belief that underneath all of the kind of social conditioning that has formed who each of us is in this material world, there is a divine calling placed on all of our hearts. And that divine calling, it might be just some, huge, big, incredible, scientific discovery or accomplishment. And it's almost more likely that it might be something very simple about how to just live in peace in the world with yourself and with others. That this divine calling is not ego-driven. It's not about being called to do something to dominate or control other people. It's a call to be exactly who we are and what we have to bring. And that somewhere in there, God, the Holy One, divine intelligence, whatever you want to call, whatever word you want to use for this source of life that has created this incredible universe, that wisdom lives inside of us and it's ready to come out. And if we're going to live in community in a way that is vibrant and growing and loving and holy, we want to live from that place and for that place, and open to discovering and listening and being curious with each other about what truths are emerging from that place. I hope that makes sense. And I guess my last point in that regard is to say we've had over these last, certainly, just since my adult life, the emergence of social media, all that I'm offering right now on YouTube, has made it possible to connect with, way more humans than maybe we were organically originally able to connect with. And on some level, that's amazing because we have been able to find our people. Some of us are born in circumstances where there isn't the freedom for us to be exactly who we are. And so the internet has opened up the possibility of us finding, people who resonate with our deepest love and our deepest sense of who we are. And that's beautiful and wonderful. And like all things on the other side of that, there's been a rise of kind of finding each other online, but then maybe not finding those embodied relationships where we get to live day to day with other people doing the things of life who also kind of know and love who we fully are. And it feels to me like right now there's a recognition of that. We recognize that if you only have virtual connections and they're only passive, like what we're experiencing now, where we're watching videos or maybe chatting online, there can be a certain degree of connection with that for sure. I mean, I have been deeply changed by humans who I have only listened to on the internet. So something is happening here. Some kind of connection is happening here that is so real, and I don't want to discount it. And it's good to be together. And we can only really be together with like a certain amount of other humans. We can't have 5,000 friends necessarily. So there's in this effort to build the Helen Keller Spiritual Life Collaborative, I'm really interested to find new ways to connect with others who we discover globally and online that provide more of that real heart connection, and that provide more and that also perhaps just like help us to learn how to do this love, honesty, usefulness work, so that we'll then start to practice that in our personal relationships. Simultaneously with building this ministry, I'm also like working on doing this stuff with my husband. And just recently, he shared some truths with me that were really hard for me to hear. And I went through a very dark valley of going, did I want to know that? Was that, would I have preferred to have been ignorant of this fact, and had to really do the work of saying, yes, I want to know this. I love you. You are my beloved. Of course I want to know these things. We need to grow in our knowing of each other. It's hard. It's really hard. And we don't have a lot of, practice with deep honesty in relationships, because the way we have been formed in previous generations is to, conform to the role and keep things, speak to please others versus speaking to really know deeply each other. And so I'm so grateful that he's risked that honesty and that we're finding our way in these shared values. That's a very lived experience that I'm having right now. And all of us are having, lived experience with our partners, with our children, with our neighbors. My hope is that the collaborative will be a space where we can kind of learn from each other, connect more deeply through Zoom formats, encourage each other to build these more loving, honest, true relationships in our individual and personal lives. And then I'm really excited about putting on some some large gatherings where we'll get together around the planet, perhaps. We have been pitching this vision of holding pilgrimages to spaces that were important to Helen Keller's life. And what does it take to go on a pilgrimage? You gotta figure out what everybody needs and who needs what. And the intention of these pilgrimages too is that we would center disabled bodies. So we would center people with disabilities, really getting into the work of what does everybody need to do this. And I also believe that these pilgrimages will have to be hybrid events. So some people will go in person, but some people will go with us virtually, and we will just find a way to really start to embody what it is to live together in our differences. We'll practice, If church isn't anything, I would assume it should be a practice, a laboratory for love. And I really believe the work of love right now that's needed is how can we love each other and be really radically different with radically different needs, expectations, wants, preferences, to communicate those and then find a way to have fun together, to do good things together in the world, and to proclaim this vision of life where we really can be living in peace with one another and receiving the full offering that we each have to bring, because we all have so much to bring. The key to peace on this earth lives in the heart of each being that exists on this planet, and all of us are important to that endeavor. So I hope that makes sense. This will be my last theological foundation for a while. I'm going to let this down and just be myself. But I hope this gives you some frame for where we're headed, what this endeavor is. And I pray that you'll want to join us, because we will be made more perfect as each person enters in. We will grow, evolve, develop, expand as we hear more ways to be human. That's the intention of this effort. And I'm pretty excited to see where it leads. Blessings, friends.